The road is long out here. With every single step, it just seems to get longer every single day. We awaken with the first glimmer of sun, and those that were on night guard, fire guard, whatever you want to call it, are always complaining, but always complaining with breakfast ready for everybody. And now, with a drink I believed I'd never find. We were walking along, and I saw the red and green beans. They stuck out as we walked, and I ran immediately out of the convoy just to get a handful of them and shove them into my pouch. Those that witnessed me do this were confused. I had to tell them not to worry about it, as I wasn't even sure that this was going to work, but you gotta try, right? That night, I took the night guard, and swapping out a few times with the fire watch and assuring that I had the last shift at the fire, sitting there, I pulled out these beans, these magic beans, and began to roast them on the coals, moving them around a little bit with a stick as I roast them, as pretty much is the only way I have to do it. I truly wasn't expecting much. I didn't even know if I had the right thing, but the smell. Oh, that smell. That pleasant aroma of coffee beans roasting was enough to wake a few up just to wonder what the heck that smell was. In the first glimmer of dawn, I took a mortar and pestle and I fully crushed the roasted beans, grinding them up really, really well, as best as I could, because we know it's all in the grinds. And I made myself 1 cup. I was just testing it out. The first sip was scalding hot. It was bitter and strong enough to knock the stink off a turd at 300 meters, but it forced my eyes open with a shock as it scorched my throat on the way down, and it was absolutely divine. After a few sips, I could feel the effects coming into play. Knowing that I would have to be awake all day, I disregarded the additional side effects that were going to happen, not wanting to have a brutal crash later. Also, I offered the rest up to the rest of the night guard. Lash was not exactly happy about the bitter flavor, but the hot liquid helped her shake off the morning chills. Melly took a sip, paused, and then tried to chug the whole damn thing. I actually had to stop her before she drank the grinds that were sitting there on the bottom, and I swear this woman just loves to drink anything bitter. Then again, with some of the things I hear about her, it makes sense. It was more than enough, actually, to give us a strong kick in the pants to get us moving that day. Most of the others wanted to try it, but there honestly wasn't anything left. I told them about the effects as we walked, and the adults agreed that it should be saved to aid those on night guard. Now, this upset the children for sure, as they wanted to try it, but I did have to warn them that too much can actually stunt their growth. Actually, having a little bit, we don't know how it's going to affect the rest. This made them a little nervous about trying it, and they were already looking up at everybody, so let's face it, if you're constantly short, you don't want to be shorter. From there, we scavenged what we could. The nighttime cup of coffee helped a bit for those on night watch. The night full of guards were not slowing us down anymore, thanks to this, myself included. Yet now the entire convoy was looking out for that certain plant. Of course, we were always looking before, but that was for subsistence, looking for edible plants. As another favor to the group, once I found something that looked like a cacao pod, I made what I hoped was a dark and bitter treat. This one, even Baron could eat, as all I had to work with was the actual seed itself and water. We didn't have any extra milk, we didn't have any sugar or anything like that. The young ones, as soon as they took a piece, loved it, and it made everybody a bit happy to have just this little treat on the trail. Yet it seemed like every time I turned around, everybody was handing me another pod, and I had to remind them that, hey, this is actually normal food. and I'd crack the pod open and tell them to suck the pulp off the outside of the seeds, but spit the seeds inside of a pouch and we'll work on it later. Around that time, we were finally getting to the west side of the mountain. We had to actually aim straight towards the mountain, and once it started to elevate, then we turned. We turned at what seemed like the west side, but it was actually south when you think about it. The foliage was getting thicker, and the trees larger as we were now out of the plains. The sun is out less due to the canopy as well, and there's also the feeling out there of being watched. You never know what might be in the trees. High above us, our flyers kept watch. We could tell when they were actually going to grab one of our dinner or something, as they had a plan. Just like hawks do. One would stay up high, scream, get the attention of the prey, and when the prey stood up, froze, looked around, trying to figure out where it was coming from, the other would swing over and land on the prey, or just snatch it up with their claws or talons. About a week into the forest, and we were cooking a fresh catch on the fire. We had reached the edge of a very, very interesting river, so we could go fishing, as it was deep enough. As I bit into the absolutely delicious piece of barbecued flesh from that river, I thought about how it was going to suck to ford this river tomorrow so much. That water was really, really cold, and once you got to the center, that sucker was moving pretty fast. And just as I swallow a large piece of this fish, I'm suddenly on high alert. I'm poking my ears up. I'm looking around, and I'm not the only one. Everyone suddenly gets quiet. Everyone's looking around. I can see movement on the other side of the river, yet even with my exceptionally good night vision, I can't pinpoint it out. Still, we don't want to make a scene at night. We don't want to run around, nor do we want to make the young worry. So we simply calm down. We're still on high alert, but we do calm a little bit. The last part is impossible, as they can sense it too. They sense our nervousness, but they still slough it off and go to sleep. Eventually, we still finish our meal and try to sleep off the weariness of the day. Scarlet is on the night guard, and I assure that she has beans to roast as well, as I want her as alert as possible tomorrow. I awake as dawn approaches to the smell of coffee and, of course, breakfast. Since I wasn't on night guard, I just needed the breakfast myself. Afterwards, I cleaned up in the river, which was quite chilly, and we all got ready to cross. Our flyers took it upon themselves to take as many as possible across the river before we began fording. Unfortunately, some of us are just too damn heavy. I was offered to be carried, but I'm large enough that I can actually help to make sure the carts don't get carried away, drawn down the river, and then we lose them. If we lose the carts, we're in deep trouble. Scarlet took my gear to the other side, though, and this would definitely help me out. Fording the river, the crossing of the river, turned out to be much easier than we thought. Though I ended up having to swim through this river, using a stick to make sure I didn't get pulled sideways, making sure the carts didn't go sideways either. Well, we finally got there, and we packed up and began our journey, or at least we would have. The sudden sound of an arrow hitting the cart had us all on edge, looking all the way around. Some even grabbed the pistols, but not pulling them out, realizing that the pulse pistols themselves are pretty much worn the hell out, and we have no way of fixing them. We don't even know if they're going to work. Looking into the trees, we could see them. At least 60 elves, men and women, all with bows notched, but they're not drawing back, not trying to hold everything there, which is A pretty good idea, since you can wear your arms out pretty quick drawing a heavy bow. Then we saw more. They were walking through the trees. At least another 50 of them. I looked, and there was something strange, something familiar, something out of a video game. And looking at the way they're dressed, you'd think it's some sort of hentai 3D video game. All of them, every single one, have a sleek, almost feminine look, even the men, with that long hair all the way down. And it looks like almost a gold shower, a gold waterfall leaking down the sides of their face. The absolutely piercing blue eyes on top of that seemed to look into your soul, and their skin was absolutely clear. How is this possible that they are absolutely flawless living in trees? And then I remembered, these are high elves. The extreme and surprising ample proportion of the females, compounded with this thin, almost lanky look of the men, made it easy to tell who was who. A few, but very few, had golden jewelry adorning their ears. It seemed like some sort of ranking system. Their clothing is sparse, but not enough to remove the need for imagination. For a moment, I wondered if they were trying to aim for me or Scarlet, considering what we are, and then I realized, wait a minute. If they live in trees, they're not going to wear a lot of clothing. They need to be able to move. We all saw this, and when we did, we quickly pushed the young behind us. I even grabbed Vex and put her dryad self behind the cart, right next to the goblin girls. Then I joined the protective line, and I could see this very tall, statuesque, full-figured marble statue of an elf walk up to us. She told us to state our business. Annoyed, without even introducing themselves, Baron snorted, and Shariel gave them a strange before I even spoke. We are simple travelers, I said. Our destination is on the other side of this mountain through your forest. We only have 2 reasons to even be in this territory. First, as stated before, is to travel through without issue. We are not trying to cause problems for you, your tribe, or anyone else or anything else here. Second, is to bring some of our people to their kin. At that point, I turn around and say, as you can see, we have several elves within our caravan. Their journeys have been very difficult, and we were hoping that they could actually find a home here with their own kind. That's when Jezebel and Inez walk forward and are standing next to me. The tall elf didn't even introduce herself yet, as she looked over the 2 with suspicion. As she did, I added, we also have others in our group seeking their own kin, but I'm not sure if their kin is here. Maybe you can help us out. That's when I called for the pixies and the fairies to come forward. As they did, a mass of other pixies and fairies emerged from the trees. They all swarmed around us, moving around in erratic patterns, just talking to each other, but so fast and so high, I couldn't understand what any of them were saying. The fays being so small that they would whip past you before you even realize. The pixies being bigger seemed to be moving up. They would stop, they would move, they would duck back and forth. It was a strange dance, and it was just something to see. As I got this statuesque woman's attention, I also said, oh, and there is one other. Turning around, I called for Vex to be brought forward, but Lash had to go get her. Vex was, well, being a dryad, she's just naturally skittish. As she got Vex, she walked forward, and Vex was very nervous. So much so that Lash had to carry her up on her shoulder, an act that clearly didn't go over well with the elves themselves. One of the elves actually yelled, "Get your filthy hands off her, you damn dirty orc!" A phrase that Lash suddenly got angry about. Vex heard this and grabbed onto Lash's head with both arms, which made tensions rise instantly, and the pixies even stopped flying around us. For a moment, we all wondered if a fight would begin. Then, a yell in a strange language, which I recognized as Elvish, but I didn't fully know it, came out. But it was a scream I could tell enough to know that the male that had just yelled was being cursed at for being rude. And at that point, another one reached over, grabbed him, and pulled him back into the tree line. The tall elf woman hardly moved during this whole thing, then asked why an orc, of all, was the caretaker of a sacred dryad. Lash yelled, "This is my sister," as she hugged Vex with one arm still holding on to Lash's head. Vex is now holding on so tight you can actually see the pressure on Lash's head, but let's face it, she's so small that she can't do any damage. I interrupted by saying that where we are from is from another continent, a place where creatures are not simply born of their own kin, but are summoned from beyond the veil, a phrase that definitely got all the elves' attention. I told them that we were from a continent where the law put us as prisoners in chains, a place we escaped from and were looking for a new home. Each species was supposed to be with their own, at least I believe so, shouldn't they? I point out how happy the fairies and pixies are now that they are with their own kind. Also, the influx of new genes into a population will make the population just ever stronger. Yet, she has to understand that due to the summoning that brings all creatures like us forward, some are family beyond blood. This phrase got their attention, and I called Lash forward, and I explained the situation using them as the prime example alongside others. This time, this queen, this chief, whatever it was, seemed to understand, as well as the others next to her. Then, this elf says, "The dryad is sacred to us. Once on the floor of this land, others will come." We didn't understand this. However, Lash decided to put Vex down, and sure enough, the moment Vex was on the ground began to shake. It seemed as though we had to just get far enough away from the river for this to happen, and other dryads came forward, but only 6. But they did arrive from the forest, seeming to morph right out of the trees. They're all clearly older, but not by much. And they're also just curious. Curiouser and curiouser they are as they came forward. Each one seemed to have this air of innocence about them. Vex actually bows and calls one elder at one point. I didn't even know that was a thing for them. Then again, she is a different species. I was confused as she looks at this so-called elder, and the elder barely looks 20, maybe 19 even. This elder, that seems elegant and pure, simply walks up to Vex and raises her up. Vex didn't want to let go of Lash at first, and after all this, she's just a kid. She's got to be freaking out. Jezebel gets down on her knee next to Vex and actually tried to relax things. And that's when the tall elf yells, "Step back, filthy one." This raised the tension again to almost a fever pitch. Inez, standing right next, says, "What the hell's your problem, old woman?" That's when the tall elf is taken back by the outburst. She turned towards Inez and says, "Young one, you do not understand. This one has tainted herself, so is no longer considered a high elf like you or I." I yelled at her at that point. She did no such thing. Anything you see, see into her soul or whatever, was done against her will by those who seek to destroy all that is beautiful. You couldn't possibly hold her accountable over the actions of others. She looks down at me with sheer hate. Little demon, the only reason you still draw breath is the power in your soul, a very old soul, strangely enough, that has not tainted itself yet. I can see into your core and see, before she can finish, a dryad hand touches her arm. She notices what it is and instantly backs away. The dryad, a seemingly teenage male, looks at me but addresses the group. It appears that emotions are taking a strange gasp in this discourse. It is within reason, and it is in everyone's self-interest to stop, clear our minds, cool our tongues. Those that desire to stay with him may do so. However, it is in everyone's best interest to allow calmer minds to prevail in this instance. With that, the group began to make camp, staying right where we were. I helped them with the fire, which honestly I just have to do another flaming loogie into a fire pit, but hey, whatever works, as everybody goes about their own work. The pixies and fairies are still around, but mainly it seems as though they're trying to say hello and goodbye at the same time. It's odd. Finding their own has made them extremely happy, but they're not exactly ready to leave us just yet. At this point, Vex is a bit upset, but some of the other dryads actually stick around to talk to her, and I'm sure simply to try and convince her. Inez, her ears just flipping out, up and down, up and down, up and down, which is a sign of frustration, is completely upset. But keeps getting visitors throughout the day, other young elves as well. Many young elves simply come to talk to her, come to talk to the rest, most likely to convince her to stay with them. For a while, she doesn't leave the camp at all, until she is told to simply go and enjoy herself and make sure she doesn't enter the trees on the other side of this clearing. As they play, I see something. A truly genuine smile eventually arrives across her face. I try to keep the mood by sharing a little bit of chocolate with those ones who are there. And, well, what little bit of chocolate's left. They all simply enjoy it. At first, some of them don't like it, but that's until the chocolate actually melts and goes down across their tongue. That night, we receive a few visitors. The village chief is back with all her poise, grace, and of course, disdain. She sits by our fire as I make the coffee itself. She enjoys the pleasant aroma, and she is excessively pleased at this point. Yet I make myself very scarce when she starts asking Jezebel about what exactly happened in your past. Though there was no way I was going to leave her alone. Scarlet and Cheryl stay with her for support. She actually grabs onto one of their arms every once in a while, and she lays out all the things that happened to her. I can see Cheryl and Scarlet comfort her when she cries at different times of the night. I see the look of disdain from the chief begin to fade into something that looks like compassion as Jezebel talks. I hear them talk about the friends that we had lost or left with their own kin as I brought the finally finished coffee. I notice the chief eyes looking me up and down at several points, pretending that she doesn't actually look down and suddenly blush. When I walked away again, Vera and Melly joined the conversation with the rest of the girls. I could hear them trying to lighten the mood as best they could. Halflings don't like things to be super duper serious. If they are, they tend to get frustrated. So, as they tried to do this, I walked into the woods to, well, simply relieve myself. And as I did, I could hear a voice coming from behind me. It was a young male voice calling to me, one I didn't recognize me, and asked if I was truly a demon. At first, since I didn't feel any malice, I kind of stood there and simply asked if, before he asked me a question, if he could simply wait until I was finished. Once done, I turned around and I realized that it wasn't just one, and there was a reason I felt two separate presences. Beside him was a female elf about his own age. She was very shy, trying not to look at me, but then again, for a young kid, I'm built like a brick shithouse. And she didn't talk when I approached them. The male elf asked me if I truly was a demon. When I confirmed, they asked exactly what kind. At that point, I had to clarify that though I am primarily an incubus, I am not a pure demon. That's just the way it is. When they asked me what else I was, I said, don't worry about that. And it was clear they didn't actually care one bit about the rest of me. Their eyes actually lit up when I told them what I was, and the male asked me if I could help them. They had been worried because they had been married for at least 5 years now, maybe more, because for elves who don't actually age fast at all, 1 century is about a year for them. They were, well, losing track of time very easy. But even after all the times they tried, they have not conceived a child. They have been told by the elders to go by the old laws and allow her to be impregnated by every other male in the tribe. This was something that was done back in the day, and it seems to have continued. If he is not man enough, or in their case, elf enough, then it should be up to the tribe to remedy the situation. Just mentioning this is causing massive distress on the female's face. It's clear that she does not want to do that. I told them, I can't make any promises I cannot keep. However, I will look into their bodies and see if there's anything that needs fixing. I decided to make sure to do the male first, as the female looked scared out of her mind. He sat down, and I sat in front of him and realized this isn't going to work unless I make physical contact. So I stood up, got behind him, put my hands on his shoulders so I could actually have contact. And when I did, I began scanning his body. And nothing really stands out, nothing exemplary. It was strange. All the plumbing was where it's supposed to be. I had to laugh at his heart. It was beating so fast that seriously, I could have danced to that. And I'm talking full on tango. It was crazy. After checking him twice, I cranked up his fluid creation along with his DNA production by about 10%, making sure that this sort of thing will wear off after a few years, being elven, probably about a decade. He was happy to find out that there wasn't anything wrong with him, yet the realization hit him maybe a half a second later. He was worried because that meant there was something wrong with her. She was still scared, but this time scared for another reason. Is she sat down. I got behind her, moved the little bit of fabric off her shoulders, which almost made her dress fall off, put my hands on her shoulders near the neck, and I began to scan. Instantly, I hit a wall. This was strange. It was like something in her blood was deliberately blocking me. Not only that, but her internal organs looked like they had been so over-medicated they were about to shut down. Going back to the blood, I noticed what it was. It's some sort of medical concoction, all right. What is this? I dug deeper and deeper, and I realized it's a contraceptive, a very virulent contraceptive that was permeating every part of her body. The body's trying to get rid of it too, but there's just so much, which is why the organs are burning themselves out. If not for Blaze's resonance and Rakishin's power boost, there wouldn't be much I could do at all. But I told the female, this is going to feel all sorts of wrong, but I need you to just hold still. She got very nervous because she realized I was about to do something, but she didn't know what. I could also tell she was nervous because her heart started racing like crazy, which actually helped, believe it or not. I had to spend some time purging the blood, which was not easy, as I had to constantly section the body and go over and over and over again because the blood is constantly moving. Once I believed I got all of it out of her blood, I moved onto her organs, repairing them one by one. After that was where this would reside, that was the marrow, which needed to be basically blowtorched from the inside out, which I could feel her shimmy and shake as I can only imagine what type of weird sensations and pain was going down her body. Then the brain had to be purged of this crap too. Fixing the pineal gland while I was in there just to make sure that this didn't have any other issues. Surprisingly, once I cleared out the brain, basically wringing it like a sponge, it made her calm. Finally, I moved all the way to her reproductive zones, resetting the counter on her eggs to make sure that she had plenty. Of course, doing so, I found out that elves are a little different. They don't exactly have a certain number sitting there. It seems as though they build them up over the course of a year, maybe two, making a fresh one every single time, which means as long as they're fertile, they don't age, which surprised the crap out of me. Now I need to know more and more repairs were also needed. And unfortunately, because of all the damage that was done, the egg production would have to be slowed down a little bit. And that would space out the pregnancies a little bit. She could have one soon, but it would take a while before she got pregnant again. The uterus itself was an absolute mess. It was just so full of this stuff. It was like slop. Going through in my own type of astroform is like walking through one of the densest fogs you've ever walked through. You know there's a wall in front of you, but you have no idea how far it is. And all you can do is swing your arms, and every time you do, clearing out a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. Finally, I got the inside of her orifice, a slight, shall we say, adjustment and also recovery. It seems as though in desperation they had got a little aggressive with each other. Basically, I gave her virginity back. Realizing this was going to make it sting a little bit, I did something else. I doubled the pleasure nerve endings that were there and turned the rest of them back on. I guarantee that was one of the reasons why the aggressive movements is she was trying to feel something. When I finally let go, she shot up and ran to the other side of a tree to vomit and also to explode out of her hind end. It seemed as though the toxin that was inside her was coming out, and it was coming out right now, all of it. The view was bad. The sound was worse. And of course, the smell was just disgusting. The male stood there screaming at me, "What did you do?" I yelled back at how she was purging the poison from her system, and that's when he looked and realized that whatever was coming out of her was coming out in a very, very odd color. Once she was done with all that, I made sure that my water skin was handed over so that she could rehydrate herself. We talked about how she got so much of that contraceptive in her body. I began to ask if anyone kept giving her food or drinks, anything out of the ordinary, to see what the hell was going on. I was absolutely shocked when they put the pieces together, when it turned out her parents had been giving her a drink to help her with growth. I was surprised because she seemed tall for an elf. The idea that her parents wanted her to mate with the entire tribe was just messed up. I couldn't understand. I asked them why. Then all of a sudden, the female got this look of oh crap on her face and almost went catatonic. The realization that her mother was a very passionate voyeur disturbed her so much at that point. It almost made her faint. The icing on the cake was when Melly joined the conversation with her claiming the mother might want to join in, as she tried to use this as a joke. This did not help. They both got up, getting ready to run back and confront her parents. That's when I told them to wait. And wait until the pregnancy is confirmed. After that, when you tell them, judge the reaction. The young female elf said she claimed she wasn't pregnant. I told them both that they should simply wait until the next night to try again. Only eat or drink what they themselves have harvested, just in case, to make sure nobody slips anything in there. And when I told her, in case somebody slips you a Mickey, she looked at me and says, "What the hell is a Mickey?" I then again realized, oh yeah, I just said something stupid. I told them on the next night they would have a bit of a surprise if they perform their marital duties at that point, but they have to wait until then. Claiming it would actually take that long to actually purge her entire system and to make sure nothing got into him. After they left, Melly looked up at me and said, "I've never known you to lie before." I simply responded without looking down, only to protect them. Fixing her is going to take a toll on her body, a really big toll. I mean, seriously, you can smell it right now. And considering how I just juiced them up, yeah, it's probably better if they start fresh after, a good meal and a good sleep. Melly laughs at this a bit and then said, the night isn't over yet. And that's the point I could feel something moving and realized as I looked down, she's lifting the loincloth off of me. As she tilted her head for a look, I said, "No, I'm just going to go to sleep." At that point, as I began walking, I realized she was following me and I turned over my shoulder and said, "By myself?" I wandered back into camp. Jezebel was actually still talking around the fire, which was amazing. Even though I was fixing somebody, I know it had to take a couple of hours, but what the hell, they're still there? I guess women can talk a lot. But as I passed by, I noticed the chief was finally looking concerned. I didn't say anything. I just simply walked past into one of the tents. I found my place to sleep, and I was out cold the moment the blanket covered me. Waking up to the hint of coffee in the air and flapjacks cooking away. Some were recovering from their drinks as I stepped out of the tent and said, "Hey, how you doing?" They're like, "Ah." I gave them a quick fix before heading off to breakfast. The night guard, of course, was complaining how there was not enough coffee, even though I could see 3 cups already sitting there drained. But they always complain. Everybody does. We settled down at that point and simply have breakfast like civilized creatures. As we ate, the pixies and fairies of the group brought over their elders to meet us. We all enjoyed the conversation, as sometimes I was asking, "What'd you say?" The problem is, a lot of them, especially the fays, their voices are very, very, very light. Many times having to sit on your shoulder and talk directly into your ear so you can hear them. The tribes say how grateful they are to receive new members. Some even coming to give us hugs as thanks for carrying their new members so long. And when I heard carrying, I was wondering what they meant, but they did mean that literally, as I did carry many of them on my shoulders, on my back, tucked in under my wings as we traveled. They said how grateful they were for keeping their new kin safe, caring for them so much. The fairies, also known as fae, were still a bit cautious around us, which is understandable, as a single accidental strike could crush them. They're very, very tiny. Yet they're also so incredibly fast, the threat is truly minimal, but the threat is still there. Fae will still be fae, I guess. If you want to know about where I come from and how the summoning works, well, I sat there along with the rest, and we started talking about how the summoning is and how I summoned, cared for Scarlet when she was young, And of course, when I mentioned this, they all looked at Scarlet, and this made them question my words, as Scarlet is clearly older, at least biologically. Scarlet and I looked at each other, grinned and chuckled a little bit, and I mentioned it's not always about biology, but chronology. But yeah, it's a bit odd when it comes to us. There's a whole myriad of factors. They didn't believe it until a certain pixie arrived. Very regal, moving very slow. A bit withered in her eyes, I could see it. As she got close, she looked onto Scarlet and I, just standing there, looking back and forth. As she moved closer, I could see that time had torn at her a bit. Yet, she speaks with grace when she says, "What these two speak is truth. I can see the age of the soul. I can see the truth in their aura. Tell us now, young incubus, how has this come to pass?" I pause, hesitating right there, long enough for Scarlet to get defensive, actually defensive enough to move one of her wings beside me. I simply put my hand on her thigh to calm her down a little bit and make sure she doesn't talk. Then I told the Pixie Queen, as it turns out, the how is beyond any current understanding. The why, well, that is something I'm not sure of. Yet, as I look at those that have now reached their own kind, how they can be now living a full, rich life compared to when I first met them. And they can live without fear of torment, fear of pain, a life with the expectation of the future of love and family, a life where they can be who and what they were meant to be. Perhaps in this moment, the why is all that matters, my dear. We all looked up at the children playing, all the young fays, all the young pixies moving around, some of the couples even sitting there holding on to each other, the new members already looking at other kin as their potential mates, some with deep desire in their eyes, realizing that so many can finally say, "I'm home." Well, it turned out that was enough to end the questioning. The Pixie Queen seemed to smile at this sight. Then suddenly she dropped onto my leg. I barely felt it, as she's hardly 16 inches tall. I asked if she was all right because she just plopped down all of a sudden. Her answer was dismissive, saying how she doesn't get out much. Well, I knew that was bullshit. Since she was actually on my leg, I could actually scan her since I had physical contact. I asked if she was the one who protected them, raising not just my hands, but my wings and my tail, pointing at everybody around us. When she agreed, I asked if she would like me to fix her. She laughed and agreed, believing that I was full of it. That is, until her entire body lit up with painless flames that seemed to wrap around her, come out of her own pores. At first, she was worried. It was fear in her eyes, but suddenly feeling the energy going through as though she was back to being her own adolescent self, well, that calmed her quickly. She was questioning this as I continued. She recognized the magic somehow, and in about a minute, I was done and simply looked down at her and asked, "How do you feel?" In a moment, she flew off with an intense speed, laughing as she does. Before I could bask in any praise, she flew right into my face with enough force that I ended up falling backwards off the log I was sitting on. She began to thank me profusely before launching off again, and by the time I had gotten up and finished my breakfast, she had returned carrying something. In her hands, she carried an old fae. That's when the Pixie Queen asked me to heal the Fae Queen. Before I did, I was actually wondering, in this area of the world, are all the different types of species matriarchal? They all looked at me and said, yes, simultaneously. I was surprised and didn't even feel the coldness of the river that I was washing myself in, and simply began to walk out. But as I did, before I even reached for this little Fey Queen, I asked, why don't they ask Inez or Jezebel? That's when the Pixie Queen was confused. But when I told her that the two elves can do the same thing, it just takes them longer to do it, she was amazed. They can? How do they learn this? I watched them fix this Fey Queen. This little fairy went from looking like she was ready to keel over off of her walker and wheelchair into something that was absolutely strikingly gorgeous, perfectly healthy, at prime reproductive age. It was crazy. I will admit I did help at the end, but the results would have been the same either. I was just getting bored watching them work. Afterwards, this Fey Queen also took off and flew around enjoying the new youth we jade for. By lunch, the Dryads had actually returned to our encampment, and Vex hurried up and went straight towards Lash. Vex was so happy to be with her own kind, and that was actually breaking her heart. It was breaking her heart to say that she would actually be staying in this forest. This was the first time I could see on Lash's face that she had shown that type of sorrow. She had always been strong, specifically for her little one, though she seemed to suppress it very hard. Of course, she had a chance to hide this as we all went up and congratulated Vex on being part of her new family. We were so glad that she has finally got a home. It wasn't traveling. She didn't have to worry about anybody taking advantage of her or anything. We were still celebrating at that point when more of the elves actually showed up. And when they did, they looked very serious, which is not a good sign. In front of us all, the elf queen declared that the law of their land will not have an exception. If they allow one exception, they must allow all exceptions. So even though Jezebel's body had been completely healed by me and the scars of her soul were what was the problem, this meant that she was still tainted. She will not be accepted into this Elben tribe. Inez has not been tainted in such ways, and she will be allowed to stay. And Inez, hearing this, was clearly pissed as she looked over at Jezebel, who was crying into Sharil's chest at this point. Sharil even wrapping her wings around Jezebel to try and comfort her more. Inez immediately steeled herself and claimed no deal, and insulted the queen with a few different types of Elven curses, which sound absolutely silly when said in common. The queen, holding herself as real as possible, tried to use reason and ended up trying to be pragmatic, even going so far as to choose a mate for her, one that she would be bonded with as soon as she came of age. When she mentioned this, she motioned for one to come forward, and I looked as this skinny, feminine-looking male stepped forward. He had his chest, or what counts as a chest, up and wide, shoulders back, trying to look strong. I saw this and started laughing uncontrollably, laughing so hard I wasn't even making noise. The queen saw this and demanded to understand what was so humorous. Then I said, Inez is a very, very strong young lady. I doubt he could even handle her on his best day. Our entire group began to laugh and cheer and agreeing with this. The queen, annoyed, believing this was a disgrace to her crown, demanded proof of our claim. Without skipping a beat, Baron took a deep breath in that huge minotaur chest of his and sent out a long cry, a huge moo into the air, loud enough that everybody could hear. And this also got everyone's attention. Right afterwards, Lash screamed, "Circle up!" We all moved as one, creating a very large circle around. We brought out training swords made of wood and tossed them in. The male elf showed confidence as he picked up the wooden sword and swung it around. However, his movements betrayed his extreme lack of skill. Baron yelled the rules. 5 strikes to win. Withdrawals, knockouts, or whoever dies first loses. With that, the battle began. Not with a yell, not with a whistle, not with a yip, not with anything else, but the battle began. I looked at the queen and grinned very wide, as I knew the little spitfire Inez is. How do I know? I trained her pretty much every night myself. Her mastery of her resonance is beyond impressive for her age, meaning her movements are far faster than anybody can counter, at least not without having extensive training. She moves sideways and all the way around as though she's on a pillow of air. The way she tilted sometimes, you would think that she's bending the air herself, or like she's skating, like ice skates or something like that. But she would be able to jump up and move herself in ways that were absolutely crazy, like she has some sort of thruster mechanisms all around her body. She was using this to get close and striking every time she passes. The first time she struck the leg, making him drop to his knee, limiting his mobility because even though he got back to his feet, his muscles ached. Then she struck the wrist on his dominant hand, limiting his dexterity and forcing him to use his non-dominant side. After he shook his wrist, getting the pain out, he dove for the wooden sword that he had dropped, only to get smacked on the head by Inez. As he flailed around trying to strike anything, she spun around and spanked his ass with the flat part of the sword, just for good measure. As she blocked a strike, she used the wind to pull out his legs as though from underneath and behind him. Then, as he fell on his back, jumped on him, and she ended up stopped as she landed right on his chest with the wooden blade touching his forehead. "Winner!" Baron yelled out. Hardly breathing hard, Inez loudly said, "Did you really think one man is enough to satisfy me?" I couldn't help it. I had to laugh at this little battle maniac that she was, and the way she phrases things, always getting it wrong. Then again, I wonder if she is deliberately doing it. Yet I laughed even harder, noticing the boy's reaction as his head was on the other side compared to where I was standing. Guess he likes strong women. But before we knew it, another boy, another elf, ran in, picked up the fallen sword, and swung at Inez, trying to take her on. We almost rushed in as he claimed all of a sudden that he was protecting his brother's honor or something like that. Clearly the older brother. He went down just as quickly as his younger brother, with a few extra swats across the ass for good measure. When it was over, the queen declared that both brothers shall be hers when she joins the tribe. For a good few moments, I wondered what Inez would say, but then I smelled something, and the aroma that she was putting off, well, I believe Inez's hormones had a bit to do with her decision. With all that settled, I ended up having to help comfort Jezebel, but it turns out she's actually much stronger than I give her credit for. We stayed a few more nights as we need to stock up for our journey. We still had places to go, things to do, people and creatures to see. It's going to be a much longer walk this time, as we actually can't go through Elven territory. We have to turn around. As it turns out, this is the end of the trail. There is no trail beyond this clearing. The road just kind of ends 400 meters in front of us, right across this valley. And that means back across the river. There's just enough space on this side of the river for trading, or maybe an ambush if some sort of raiders want to show up. After packing up the morning we were going to leave, we said our goodbyes to everybody. Vex was all smiles, but I could tell there was just that hint of sadness there, which I expected because I felt it too. She was like a little sister to me. I didn't want to see her go. She didn't want to say goodbye to Lash, yet reminded us that she was a dryad. Once she learned how, she could, as she said it, traverse the trees. I wasn't sure what that was, but I could hazard a guess. The pixies and fairies kept trying to show their appreciation. Inez was content with her new arrangement. 2 males, brothers even, would be hers once she comes of age. She, of course, won these by proving just how strong she was in battle and in her own magic resonance. In fact, she's so good that she's now the queen's apprentice and possible successor. Before leaving, Scarlett and I gave our little bonuses. Being primarily made out of resonance and magic, the pixies and fairies realized something was up instantly when I gave our bonuses. Even though they wouldn't understand exactly what it was until later, they did thank us. When I asked Inez if she wanted a booster or anything like that, her request was odd. Then again, realizing that she's going to have 2 husbands, it can make sense to make sure that activity doesn't hurt as much. Afterwards, I shook hands with her 2 husbands-to-be, which looked at me with sheer disdain. However, when I told them that Inez was like a little sister to me, they understood what I meant without question, and I could see a little bit of respect in their eyes as well. With that, I gave them a boost as well. Then again, I think, enhancement is a better word for those 2. They're still growing after all, so it's not going to seem too out of place. As we crossed the river, I noticed that Jezebel was actually wearing elven clothing. I was amazed I didn't notice it until then. That relatively sparse clothing made me think, does she feel a draft? When I mentioned it, it turns out that even though the law prohibits her from officially joining the tribe, the clothes were a way of recognizing her and her strength as an elf herself. As she climbed out of the river, glistening in the morning sun, I was once again grateful for my young body so I wouldn't be embarrassed. What made things worse was her full figure form filling out that blouse, which, since it was wet, was almost transparent at this point. And now I'm suddenly grateful for this freezing cold river water I'm climbing through. Once out of the river, it's time to get walking. Following our own trail, we have even less in this convoy. Good thing too is we have to circle all the way to the other side of this damn mountain, basically making a 3/4 rotation around the base of this mountain before we can head in the actual direction we want to go, which is annoying to say the least. It's going to be another month, maybe 2 of travel before we even reach what's considered to be the next set of villages. And I don't know if I'm excited or scared for what might come next. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today on part 15 of Something Familiar. And before I go, I need to say that today's winner is Alan Williams, with Douglas Scarborough coming in a really close second. And I also need to send out a massive thank you to the supporters of this channel, and they are Douglas Scarborough, Prozac and Pancakes, Brian Kemp, Erica Gem, MTF Guard, Guardian Sage, SS Demon, and Steve Ewing. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntext.
Ejecting pilot.